Hi, everyone. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Monday as we watch a very strong, very vigorous upper air storm rotating in the southeastern part of the United States. Isn't really moving very much at the moment, so it continues to flare up some heavy thunderstorms and heavy downpours into eastern South Carolina through North Carolina into parts of Virginia. And we have a lead area of rain that's moving northward, but there's also quite a bit of dry air throughout much of New England. You can see it here and back over through the Great Lakes where the weather is quite nice today, other than the high clouds that are moving through. And you can see the clouds that are trying to advance northward. They kind of hit the dry air, and there's just a bit of a wall. Not a big surprise, really, considering what's going on. And when we look at the radar, the latest radar, you can see this arc of very heavy rain over the eastern half of South Carolina, through much of North Carolina and into southern Virginia. Numerous flood watches are up for this particular area. And all of this rain is eventually destined to move up to the northeast. Now, some of that rain that was on the northern edge, you can see it here across southern Pennsylvania. That's what's hitting that dry air. Now, we have some of that rain aloft on the radar reaching up to about New York City and Long Island, but it's weakening quite somewhat. As the day goes on, we'll probably see some of this survive and maybe make it up into northern New Jersey, southeastern New York, and southern Connecticut and Long Island. I would suspect that the first batch of rain is going to be very light based on what we're seeing model-wise. And with regards to severe weather today, there's a marginal risk of severe weather along the Carolina coastline from North Carolina into eastern South Carolina, which makes sense considering where that arm of rain is on the radar. You can see it here as it lifts up to the northeast, and also a general area of thunderstorms throughout the central parts of the Central Plains and on up into the northern half of the Rockies. We've got some rain coming into the northwest. We've got some spotty precipitation across Idaho and Wyoming, and also some showers and some thunderstorms in parts of the Dakotas, some heavier downpours, maybe an isolated thunderstorm in that particular region. So let's take you through what we think is going to happen here, and we'll start with the GFS. Now, one of the things that is going to keep this from being a monstrous rain all the way up and down the coast is that this low is going to reach its peak intensity here and then somewhat weaken as it moves northward, but not completely weaken. There'll be a fairly decent area of rain that'll move through here. You see what happens today. Really, much of it just doesn't, the northern edge of it really just dries up as it moves northward. And then it starts to saturate a bit later tonight into Tuesday morning. This lead area up here is on the light side. It's tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night that some heavier rains get involved here in the darker greens. Also be a bit of a, probably be a bit of a breeze coming in from off the ocean. Maybe not windy per se, but it certainly will probably get breezy for a little while. So the onshore flow is going to keep temperatures pretty much in the low to mid 50s. Now, once we get into Wednesday, that low lifts up and out, and it's replaced by a southwest flow. We've got another cold front that's going to be approaching, and that'll be weakening somewhat as it moves eastward, reaches the coast along about Friday with a couple of showers. Now, here's where, the question for the weekend for some areas will be, the complication of whether there'll be some an onshore flow, because there is a high that's trying to build to the north, and we also see a pretty vigorous area of weather across the southern plains in the middle Mississippi Valley. I think there's likely to be some severe weather here as we move through the end of the week and into the weekend for Friday, some on Friday, late Friday, and then particularly for Saturday. The GFS is really highlighting a large area of heavy rain and thunderstorms in parts of the middle Mississippi Valley. You can see it here in the yellows and oranges. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a fairly decent outbreak of severe weather as low pressure winds up developing into Texas. And by the way, you can see there's snow back up into parts of New Mexico and Colorado. And when we get to the west, we'll talk about that. But here's the problem for Saturday. There's going to be a front that's going to hang by pretty close by. So with that onshore, an attempt for an onshore flow trying to develop south of that front, it'll probably be in the 70s and 80s, but north of it, it's going to be problematic. So figuring out the forecast for this particular area is going to be a bit difficult. Maybe Saturday will be the one warm day, and then after that, it looks like that's the vigorous system that comes out of the southwest, out of Texas, runs up into the Great Lakes, and that's going to put us in the chance for some showers along about early next week. You can see it here. There's a fairly vigorous low that runs up into the Great Lakes with a cold front that's approaching the coastline. So something we'll probably have to pay attention to as we move down the road. So overall, I think the pattern going into May is going to be a little bit on the cool side in the Northeast, not especially warm. We see these vigorous systems going into the Great Lakes. We're now into the end of the first week of May, and it does have a fairly strong cold front approaching by the end of that first week, and then out it goes, and we continue to just see weather system after weather system moving along with this sort of onshore flow battle that we're going to play with. Now, I'm going to switch off to the NAM. So I want to break down what's going to happen tomorrow with respect to the radar presentation. First off, at least through later today, as we take a look, you can see on this version of the NAM, at least into late this afternoon, there really isn't too much going on around the northern half of New Jersey, New York City, and Long Island, with more concentration of bands of rain down further south, maybe into southernmost New Jersey and back over into Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And here's the low as it forms, as it goes out offshore and then starts moving northward. It reaches its peak intensity when it's off the southeast coast before it starts to weaken a bit. Now here's for Tuesday. There's a band of light rain that moves through overnight, maybe with the occasional heavy downpour. But it's Tuesday that the rain really fires up here on the NAM model. You can see it here from southern New England back down through most of eastern Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey into Maryland and Delaware, and there are embedded heavy downpours there that sweep in from off the ocean. So I think the idea of a 1 to 2 inch rainfall looks pretty good as the low moves northward as we move into Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. By Wednesday morning, the back edge of the rain is pulling away. So I think we'll just probably spend the day Wednesday with leftover clouds and maybe a leftover passing shower or two before we dry out more significantly on Thursday. And of course, once we lose the onshore flow this time of year, temperatures are going to naturally zoom up, or at least try to move up. And when we look at the 2-meter temperatures here for by Wednesday afternoon, we've got 60-degree temperatures coming back. But during the day tomorrow, you can see the impact of the onshore flow here. I'll just roll it back to today. So it might make 60 today or a little bit better, but then once we get into tonight and tomorrow, temperatures fall into the upper 40s and low 50s and pretty much stay there all day Tuesday, except maybe from South Jersey southward and into Tuesday night. So it's going to be a very raw, chilly Tuesday into Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, once we get the bounce back, once the low moves out, the temperatures start bouncing back. And you see this expanding area of 70s and 80s to the southwest. So some of that warm air is going to try and get in here for Thursday and for Friday. And then after that, I'm going to just switch to the GFS so we can take you through the weekend issues with regards to onshore flow. So here's Wednesday. Here's Thursday. It was pretty warm with temperatures in the 70s. 70s again on Friday. You can see the 80s down into Virginia, North Carolina. And then as we go into Saturday, Saturday will be, I think, the warmest day of the stretch where we couldn't see temperatures up into the 80s into southern New England and on up in through New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania. But then after that, it becomes problematic with that front hanging by so close. You can see it's cooler on Sunday in places to the north, but still pretty warm from South Jersey southward. So it's going to be tough from a forecast standpoint trying to figure it out. Look at how it has it drawn for Monday. It's got upper 70s and low 80s from southern New Jersey down into Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and it's got upper 40s and low 50s for southern New England. Again, all of that precludes the front and the cloud cover and an onshore flow. All right, so let's look at the West now. And, we've been telegraphing the fact that there's probably going to be some action for the Rockies over the next week or so. And indeed, the models are showing some fairly vigorous precipitation there Tuesday into Wednesday. Also, another system comes into the Pacific Northwest that follows, and that translates into the Rockies as we get into Thursday and Friday, and particularly going into that weekend, next weekend, with this low developing in Texas. There's probably going to be some significant snows in some areas in Colorado and even down into New Mexico. You can see how vigorous the snow area is here, and also the possible severe weather that goes from eastern Oklahoma through Missouri and into Illinois and into Indiana, with that low going out. So that low pulls out northeastward, and then over time, yet another system for the middle of next week for the Central Rockies. The Northwest calms down a little bit, but then there's another system late in the period as we get to May 5th and 6th, and that too translates into some action for the northern half of the Rockies, and then that pulls out into another low that goes ahead to the northeast. Upper air pattern. As we look at that, we saw yesterday, the models are trying to get blocky to some degree, which would suggest some cooler weather into the east. It's going to be interesting to see if that is indeed the case. The overnight model runs, and you see that upper air disturbance here in the southeast. You see how it weakens as it moves northward because that ridge builds in the eastern part of the U.S., and there it is as we go into next weekend. Troughing continuing out in the western part of the United States, ridge in the east, and you've got lower than normal pressures out in the central Atlantic, the north central Atlantic. That ridge still kind of stubborn before it goes away early next week, and then you start to see some vigorous troughs in the east. Here's that blocking I'm talking about for later next week. You have that sort of blocking high there, so that's going to favor troughs being more vigorous in the eastern states. Of course, we know about the endless Pacific jet that just doesn't want to go away. Eventually, what the model does late in the period is, while it maintains that block and it's got a low out to the east, it does want to try to pull the ridge up along about 90 west as a deep trough goes down into the western part of the United States, but it does keep the east on the edge of some cooler air, the east and particularly the northeast. Not so much the mid-Atlantic and the south, but certainly the northeast being cooler. And I think I think that's going to be what we're going to be looking at as we go into the first part of May. Fairly vigorous active pattern, a lot of changes back and forth, and a lot of opportunities for rain, although it's not as much needed now as it was when we were sitting maybe a year ago with the developing drought situation. The drought has eased, and in some places has completely disappeared now across the Northeast. There are still some pockets that remain a little bit dry, but they're sort of playing catch up as these rain events come along. Their deficits continue to get knocked down. So good news, at least from that respect. And in the West, the action just continues until further notice. Okay, so latest web posts and also latest radars and satellite loops as we follow this rain along in the east on meteorologistjoechaffe.com. Angry Ben has the New York City perspective on nycweathernow.com. You can check the local forecast for New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, and eastern Pennsylvania. I think I said New Jersey too. If I didn't, New Jersey as well on my weather app. Specific forecast for those areas. You can download that for your iPhone or for your Android and subscribe to it. It's just 99 cents a month, and you get my forecasts at least twice a day and more often when weather conditions warrant. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, just hit the little red subscribe button on the YouTube channel page and become a regular subscriber. You get notified of when new videos come up. Join into the conversation that we have on a day-to-day basis, and it doesn't cost you a dime, which is even better. It's absolutely free. All right, everybody, enjoy your Monday, and hope you had a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.